Ambassador Marcus Reed stood in the center of the massive chamber, feeling smaller than he had ever felt in his life. The walls stretched up into darkness, covered in symbols from 100 different worlds. Around him sat the representatives of the Galactic Council, much more alien and terrifying than the last. The Ashanti delegate looked like a living mountain of blue crystal, its faceted surface reflecting the dim light in patterns that hurt too. Look it directly. When it spoke, the sound came from everywhere at once, like glass bells ringing in perfect harmony. Human representative, the crystalline being said, "Your species has become a problem." Marcus tried to keep his voice steady. "What kind of problem?" the Krell delegate answered instead. It was a writhing mass of tentacles and eyes, speaking through a translation device that made its words sound flat and emotionless. "Your numbers grow too fast. Your aggression spreads like disease. You consume resources without permission." The third member of the ruling council was the hardest to look at. The Etherean was made of pure energy, shifting between colors that had no names. His voice came directly into Marcus's mind, cold and alien. "The galaxy has rules," it said without speaking. "Balance must be maintained. Order must be preserved." Marcus felt sweat running down his back. "We follow the trade agreements. We stay within our designated space. We haven't broken any laws." The Ashanti made a sound like breaking glass that might have been laughter. "Laws are for civilized species. You are barely past your primitive phase. You still fight wars among yourselves. You still believe in individual worth over collective." "Good. That is why the Council has made a decision," the Krell added. "Your species will be reduced to manageable numbers. 80% will be removed. The remaining 20% will be relocated to suitable worlds under proper supervision." The words hit Marcus like physical blows. He staggered backward, his mind struggling to process what he had just heard. "You're talking about killing 4 billion people. We are talking about galactic stability," the Etherean's voice echoed in his skull. "Your species produces too many individuals with dangerous tendencies, too many inventors, too many explorers, too many who refuse to accept their place." Marcus found his voice again, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "You can't just decide to murder most of my species." The Ashanti's crystal surface pulsed with brighter light. "Can and we have." The decision was unanimous among all 3 ruling species. The mathematical models are clear. Humans, in their current numbers, represent a threat to galactic order. Within 50 standard years— "What kind of threat?" Brocus demanded, his fear turning to anger. "We're one small world. We have maybe 100 ships total. We can't threaten anyone." The Krell's tentacles writhed more rapidly. "Not military threat. Cultural threat. Ideological threat. Your species spreads ideas like viruses, individual freedom, democratic government, economic competition. These concepts destabilize proper hierarchies." Marcus felt sick. "So, you want to commit genocide because you don't like our politics?" "We want to preserve civilization," the Etherean replied. "Your species has already influenced 12 minor worlds to abandon their traditional governance. 3 have attempted to withdraw from council oversight entirely. This cannot continue." The chamber fell silent except for the humming of alien machinery. Marcus looked around at the faces and forms of the other delegates. None of them met his eyes. Some looked uncomfortable, but none spoke up. "How long do we have?" he asked finally. 30 standard days, the Ashanti announced. "You will provide lists of which individuals are to be preserved. Priority will be given to those who demonstrate proper cooperative attitudes. Scientists and engineers will be valued if they show appropriate respect for council authority." Marcus's hands clenched into fists. "And if we refuse?" The 3 ruling delegates exchanged looks that somehow conveyed perfect understanding despite their completely different natures. "Then we will reduce your numbers to 0 instead of 20%, the Krell said simply. "The galaxy has weapons you cannot imagine. Ships that could turn your sun into a weapon against you. Technologies that could make your world uninhabitable. In ours, the Etherean's presence pressed against Marcus's mind like a weight. "Do not mistake this for negotiation, human. This is notification. The decision has been made. You exist now only because we permit it. Marcus straightened his shoulders. I need to return to Earth. My government will need time to consider your demands. There is nothing to consider, the Ashanti said. There is only compliance or extinction. Choose wisely. As Marcus turned to leave, one of the minor delegates spoke up. It was a reptilian being from a world he didn't recognize. Ambassador. It said in accented but clear English, I am sorry. Many of us did not vote for this. But the three ruling species control the military, control the trade routes, control everything. The Krell whipped around to glare at the speaker. Councilmember Reth, you will not interfere in this matter. The reptilian being lowered its head but continued speaking to Marcus. Just know that. Not all of us agreed. Some of us remember when our own worlds faced similar choices. Marcus nodded gratefully and walked toward the exit. Behind him, he could hear angry discussion breaking out among the delegates. But the voices of the three ruling species dominated all others. The journey back to Earth took 5 days. Marcus spent every waking hour trying to figure out how to tell his own species that they had been sentenced to death by creatures they had trusted. How do you explain to 8 billion people that aliens they had looked up to as wise and advanced wanted to murder most of them? He thought about the reptilian delegate's words. How many other species had faced this same choice? How many had submitted? How many had been wiped out entirely? By the time his ship entered Earth's atmosphere, Marcus had made a decision. He would tell President Torres and the World Council exactly what the aliens had said. But he would also tell them something else. He would tell them that humanity had one advantage the aliens might not have considered. Humans had never been very good at accepting ultimatums. As his ship landed at the United Nations spaceport, Marcus looked up at the blue sky and white clouds. Of home, in 30 days, this might all be gone. Unless humanity could find a way to do what no other species had managed. Unless they could tell the galaxy no. President Alina Torres stood at the head of the emergency session, looking out at the faces of world leaders who had never imagined they would be discussing the extinction of their own species. The United Nations Assembly Hall buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from every nation tried to process what Ambassador Reed had told them. Ladies and gentlemen, Torres said, her voice cutting through the chaos. We have 28 days to make a decision that will determine whether humanity survives or dies. The Prime Minister of Britain raised his hand. Madam President, surely there must be some room for negotiation. Perhaps we could offer something else in exchange. Reed shook his head from his seat at the front table. I asked about alternatives. They made it clear this isn't a negotiation. It's an ultimatum. The Russian representative leaned forward. What? About the other species? Surely some of them would support us. A few seemed uncomfortable with the decision, Reed admitted, but they're afraid of the ruling council. The Ashanti, Krell, and Etherians control everything. Military, trade, communications. No one dares oppose them openly. Torres walked to the center of the room, and we need to consider our options. Option 1 is compliance. Somehow choose. For a billion people to die, and hope the aliens keep their word about the rest? The room erupted in angry voices. The delegate from India stood up. How does one choose who lives and who dies? By lottery? By age? By usefulness? It's impossible. Option 2, Torres continued, raising her voice over the noise, is to fight. Our military leaders tell me we have no chance against their technology. They could destroy us from space before we could even launch a defense. General Kane, the head of Earth's combined military forces, nodded grimly. Our best estimates suggest they could wipe out our major cities in the first hour of any conflict. We're talking about weapons we can't even understand. The Chinese representative spoke up. Then what is option 3? Torres looked around the room. Option 3 is something that officially doesn't exist. Dr. Park, would you please explain? Your research? A thin man with tired eyes stood up from the back of the room. Most of the delegates had never seen him before. For the past 15 years, I have been working on dimensional barrier technology. The project was classified because the early tests were ... dangerous. Dangerous how? Asked the Brazilian delegate. Dr. Park pushed his glasses up his nose. First prototype accidentally removed a small mountain from our reality for 3 weeks. When it came back, everything living on it was dead. We didn't know if we had killed them, or if they had simply been displaced somewhere else. The room fell silent. Torres nodded for him to continue. But the technology has improved, Park said. We believe we can now create a stable barrier around the entire planet. Earth would become invisible to their sensors, unreachable by their weapons, completely hidden from the galaxy. The German chancellor frowned. For how long? Theoretically, indefinitely. But there would be consequences. No trade with other worlds. No communication, no travel beyond the barrier. We would be completely alone. The Japanese representative stood up. And what happens when they discover we're gone? Won't they search for us? Reed answered this time. They'll assume we found a way to kill ourselves rather than submit. From their perspective, it would make sense. They see us as unstable and violent. Torres walked back to the podium. The choice is simple. Submit to genocide, fight a hopeless war, or disappear entirely and hope we can find another solution. The debate that followed lasted 18 hours. Some argued for submission, saying that 20% of humanity was better than none. Wanted to fight, even knowing they would lose, saying it was better to die with dignity than live as slaves. But as the hours passed, a consensus began to emerge. When the final vote was taken, it was unanimous, except for 3 abstentions. Humanity would disappear. The next 26 days were unlike anything in human history. Every nation contributed to the barrier project. Factories that had made cars switched to producing the exotic materials Park's team needed. Scientists who had spent their careers competing began sharing their research freely. Military bases that had been enemies for decades worked side by side. General Kane coordinated what he called the deepest preparations. While most of the world focused on the barrier, a small group of military personnel began work on projects that were so secret they had no official names. If humanity was going to hide, they would use that time to prepare for the day they might have to emerge. Dr. Park worked without sleep, driven by the knowledge that failure meant the death of his species. His team grew from 50 scientists to 500 to 5,000 as experts from every field joined the effort. Mathematicians worked alongside welders. Theoretical physicists learned to operate mining equipment. The barrier itself was beautiful. In its complexity, thousands of generators placed at precise points around the globe would create overlapping fields that would bend space around Earth. To outside observers, there would simply be empty space where their planet used to be. On the morning of the 30th day, Ambassador Reed sent a final message to the Galactic Council. It was short and simple. Humanity respectfully declines your offer. 6 hours later, a fleet of alien warships arrived in Earth's solar system. They came expecting to find a broken species, begging for mercy. Instead, they found nothing at all. The lead ship, a massive Ashanti crystal dreadnought, fired its main weapon at the coordinates where Earth should have been. The beam of energy passed harmlessly through empty space and continued into the void beyond. On Earth, now hidden behind Park's dimensional barrier, 8 billion people watched the alien fleet on their screens. The ships circled the area where Earth had been for 3 days. Scanning with every sensor they had, they found nothing. President Torres stood before the cameras of the world. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now officially alone in the universe. The galaxy has forced our hand, but we have not submitted. We have not fought a hopeless battle. Instead, we have chosen a third path. She paused, looking directly into the camera. We have chosen to become something they never expected. We've chosen to become ghosts. Ghosts, as any human child knows, can be very dangerous when they want to be. Behind the barrier, humanity began to change. No longer could they rely on alien technology or alien wisdom. They would have to become entirely self-sufficient. They would have to innovate and adapt in ways they never had before. But they were alive. All 8 billion of them. They were angry. The galaxy had forced Earth's hand. Now it would learn what humans could do when they had nothing left to lose, and all the time in the world to plan their response. 5 years had passed since Earth disappeared from the galaxy's view. In those 5 years, humanity had changed in ways that would have seemed impossible before the crisis. The planet behind the dimensional barrier had become a fortress, a laboratory, and a factory all at once. Colonel Lisa Hayes stood in the briefing room of a base that didn't officially exist, looking at a star map that showed targets across half the galaxy. Around her sat 23 other humans, each one representing a different covert operation that was currently active in Council space. The mining operation on Kepler-7 was a complete success, reported Captain Martinez, a woman whose official records showed her dying in a transport accident 3 years ago. We liberated over 2,000 wealthy workers and destroyed their entire extraction facility. Hayes nodded and made a note on her tablet. Any casualties on our side? None. The new phase technology worked perfectly. We were in and out before. Their security forces even knew what happened. The phase technology was Dr. Park's latest breakthrough. His dimensional barrier research had led to something even more incredible: the ability to shift objects between dimensions at will. Ships could become completely untouchable, existing in a space where alien weapons couldn't reach them, then phase back into normal reality to strike and disappear again. What about the recruitment drive on Nexus Station? Hayes asked the next operative. Lieutenant Ross, a young man who looked barely old enough to serve, smiled grimly. Better than expected? We now have active cells in 47 different species. Turns out a lot of aliens are tired of the Council's rules. This was the development that had surprised everyone. When humanity first began their covert operations, they expected to work alone. But as they struck deeper into Council territory, they discovered something remarkable. The galaxy was full of species who hated their overlords, but had never dared to resist. The first alien to join their cause had been a wealthy engineer named Kor, whose entire family had been killed in a mining accident that the Council had ruled acceptable losses. He had approached a human operative with information about Council supply routes, asking only for the chance to hurt the beings who had murdered his loved ones. Since then, the underground network had grown beyond anything Hayes had imagined possible. Whole species were quietly working to undermine Council authority, all coordinated by humans who moved through the galaxy like ghosts. The weapon shipment to the Theta rebels arrived safely, reported another operative. They've agreed to our terms. When we give the signal, they'll cut off Council access to the entire sector. Hayes looked around the room at her people. 3 years ago, most of them had been normal citizens. Teachers, mechanics, accountants, farmers. Now, they were the most effective covert operatives in galactic history, armed with technology that made them nearly unstoppable. The weapons they carried were human-made, designed specifically to fight the Council species. Ammunition that could crack Ashanti crystal armor, electromagnetic pulse grenades that disrupted Krell hive mind communication, energy dampeners that could hurt even Etherian energy beings. But their most powerful weapon wasn't technology. It was something the Council had never expected from any species. Hope, said Sergeant Kim, one of their newest recruits. We've received word from home. Shipyard projects are ahead of schedule. Hayes smiled. Back on Earth, protected by the dimensional barrier, humanity was building something unprecedented. Not just ships, but an entire fleet designed from the ground up to fight an enemy that thought it was invincible. The ships were called Morrigans, named after the ancient Celtic goddess of war. They were built using the same phase technology that protected the covert operatives, but on a massive scale. Each ship could carry 1,000 troops and disappear from reality at will. More importantly, they were crewed by volunteers from every species that had joined the human cause. The first Morrigan, already operational, was commanded by a human captain but crewed by wealthy engineers, Rigelan tactical specialists, and even a few defectors from the minor Council species. Any word from the deep reconnaissance missions? Hayes asked. The answer came from Captain Torres, no relation to the President, but equally dedicated to the cause. We've confirmed the locations of the primary Council fleet bases. Military Command is updating the target lists now. Hayes nodded. The deep reconnaissance missions were the most dangerous operations they ran. Small teams of humans with the best phase technology would infiltrate the most heavily guarded Council facilities, gathering intelligence on military capabilities and strategic resources. What they had discovered was both encouraging and terrifying. The Council was more powerful than humanity had imagined, with weapons that could destroy entire solar systems. But they were also complacent. After centuries of unchallenged rule, they had grown lazy and predictable. "There's something else," Torres continued, her expression growing serious. "We found evidence of something called the Archive Project." Room fell silent. Hayes leaned forward. "What kind of archive?" "Records of every species the Council has eliminated over the past 500 years. Not just population reductions like they threatened us with. Complete genocides. Worlds sterilized. Entire cultures erased from history." Hayes felt a chill run down her spine. "How many species?" "Over 200 confirmed. Possibly more. The records are hidden in a facility on Nexus Prime, the Council's capital world." The implications hit everyone in the room at once. Humanity hadn't been the first species to receive the Council's ultimatum. They were just the first to refuse it and survive. "We need those records," Hayes said quietly. "The galaxy needs too. Know what the Council has been doing. It won't be easy," Torres warned. "Nexus Prime is the most heavily defended world in Council space. Getting in would require a major operation." Hayes stood up and walked to the star map, looking at the symbol. "That marked the Council's capital, and will give them a major operation. It's time to stop playing small." Over the next 6 months, humanity's covert network began to shift from hit-and-run raids to something much larger. The alien species they had recruited started coordinating their resistance efforts. Council supply lines began failing across multiple sectors. Military bases reported strange equipment failures and communication disruptions, but the Council still had no idea who was behind it all. Their investigations kept leading to dead ends and confused reports. How could rebels appear out of nowhere, strike with impossible weapons, and then vanish completely? The answer was simple, though they couldn't see it. Humanity had learned too. Fight the kind of war that the Council couldn't understand. Not a war of conquest or territory, but a war of liberation and hope. Every species they freed joined their cause. Every Council facility they destroyed weakened the enemy's grip on the galaxy. Every operation they completed brought them closer. To their ultimate goal, they were going to bring down the most powerful civilization in galactic history. And they were going to do it by reminding the galaxy of something the Council had tried to make everyone forget. Freedom was worth fighting for. As Hayes looked at the latest intelligence reports, she allowed herself a small smile. The Council had made one critical mistake. When they gave humanity their ultimatum, they had assumed that disappearing from the galaxy meant giving up. Instead, it had given humanity exactly what they needed: time to prepare, space to grow strong, and the element of surprise. Soon, the galaxy would learn what humans could accomplish when they fought not just for themselves, but for everyone who had ever been told they didn't deserve to be free. Captain Alex Turner crouched behind a crystalline pillar in the depths of the Council's primary data facility, his phase suit shimmering as it adjusted to the alien architecture around him. The mission had taken 6 months of planning and was the deepest penetration into Council territory that humanity had ever attempted. Behind him, his team of 12 operatives moved like shadows through the facility. Half were human, half were alien volunteers from species that had joined their cause. The Velthy Engineer Corps worked frantically at a data terminal, his 6-fingered hands flying over controls that would have taken a human hours to understand. "How? Much longer?" Turner whispered into his CUM unit. "The security protocols are more complex than we expected," Corps replied in his translated whisper. "But I'm through the outer barriers. Beginning data extraction now." Turner kept watch while his team worked. The facility was enormous, built inside a hollow asteroid that orbited the Council's capital world. It was supposed to be impregnable. It's protected by energy shields and automated defenses that could destroy entire fleets. But the Council's technology couldn't stop enemies who existed in a different dimension. Turner's team had phased directly through the shields and walls, appearing inside the most secure facility in the galaxy like ghosts materializing from nowhere. "Got it," Core announced. "But Captain, you need to see this." Turner moved to the terminal and looked at the alien text. Scrolling across the screen, His translation implant converted the symbols into English, and what he read made his blood run cold. Species 47 Alpha. Terran Prime. Population reduced from 2.3 billion to 0. Planetary resources transferred to Ashanti Colonial Division. Ast! Level High. Elimination method. Stellar manipulation. Status complete. Turner scrolled further down the list. Species 51 Beta. Aquatic Collective. Population reduced from 890 million to 0. Planetary resources transferred to Krell Expansion Fleet. Resistance level moderate. Elimination method. Atmospheric poisoning. Status complete. The list went on and on. Species after species, world after world, all reduced to nothing more than resource allocation reports. Turner felt sick as he realized what they were looking at. These aren't population control records, he said quietly. These are genocide files. Kor's translated voice was filled with emotion. My people always wondered what happened to the Zerathi. They were our neighbors for centuries. Then one day the council announced they had chosen to relocate to distant worlds. We never heard from them again. Turner found the Zerathi entry in the database. Species 89 Gamma, Zerathi Republic. Population reduced from 4.2 billion to 0. Planetary resources transferred to Etherian Energy Collective. Resistance level low. Elimination method. Population centers vaporized. Status complete. They killed them all, Kor whispered. Every last one. Turner's team gathered around the terminal as more files were accessed. The scale of the Council's crimes was beyond imagination. Over 500 years, they had systematically eliminated any species that showed signs of independence or rapid development.
Look at this, said
Lieutenant Park, Dr. Park's daughter, who had inherited her father's brilliance with alien technology. They have prediction algorithms. They identify species that might become threats decades before they actually develop the capability. The algorithms were horrifyingly precise. Any species that developed faster than light travel without counsel. Permission was marked for elimination. Any species that refused to accept council authority was tagged for resource reallocation. Any species that showed signs of influencing others toward independence was classified as a viral threat. Humanity had checked every single box. We need to copy everything, Turner ordered. Every file, every record, every algorithm. The galaxy needs to know what the council has been doing. As the data download continued, Turner's comm unit crackled with an urgent message from their ship. Captain, we're picking up massive energy signatures. Council fleet, approaching your position. You have maybe 10 minutes before they arrive. Somehow, the council had detected their presence.
How long for the download?
8 minutes if nothing goes wrong, Kor reported. And if something does go wrong, then we get partial data or nothing at all. Turner made a decision that would change galactic history. We wait. Even if it means getting caught, this information is too important to lose. The next 8 minutes felt like hours. Through the facility's sensors, they could see the council fleet taking position around the asteroid. Massive Ashanti crystal. Ships, swarming Krell bioships, and the terrifying energy forms of Etherian vessels that looked like living stars. Download complete, Kor announced just as the facility's alarms began blaring. Phase jump now, Turner ordered. The team activated their phase suits and shifted into dimensional space just as Council security forces burst into the chamber. The aliens found nothing but empty air and the lingering energy signatures of the most successful intelligence. Operation in galactic history. Back on Earth. The data was analyzed by teams of human and alien experts working around the clock. What they found was even worse than the field team had realized. The Council hadn't just been eliminating species randomly. They had been systematically preventing the galaxy from evolving beyond their control. Any species that developed new technologies was eliminated and their innovations claimed by the Council. Any species that created new forms of art or philosophy that might inspire others was wiped out. Any species that showed signs of uniting multiple worlds under democratic principles was destroyed before they could spread their ideas. The galaxy hadn't stagnated naturally. It had been kept primitive by design. President Torres stood before the emergency session of the Free Species Alliance, the organization that had grown from humanity's covert network. Representatives from over 100 species filled the chamber, many of them learning for the first time what had really happened to their missing neighbors. "The evidence is undeniable," Torres announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. "The Galactic Council has committed genocide on a scale that defies comprehension. They haven't been maintaining galactic stability. They've been maintaining their own power by murdering anyone who might challenge them." The reptilian delegate Reth, who had tried to warn Ambassador Reed years ago, stood up with tears in his large eyes. "My people always believed the Council when they said lost species had chosen to relocate. We never imagined they had been murdered. The Ashanti crystals that they're so proud of," Torres continued, "are grown using minerals extracted from the bones of extinct species. The Krell expansion fleets are fueled by the processed remains of destroyed worlds. The Etherians feed on the death energy of murdered civilizations." The chamber erupted in outraged voices from dozens of different species. What had once been whispered suspicions were now documented facts. The Council wasn't just authoritarian. They were parasites feeding on the corpse of galactic civilization. "What do we do now?" asked a delegate from the Outer Rim. Territories. Torres looked around the chamber at the faces of beings who had spent their lives fearing the Council's power. "We tell everyone. Every world, every species, every individual in the galaxy. We broadcast this information on every communication channel we can access. The Council will try to stop us," warned another delegate. "Let them try," Torres replied. "Humanity has spent the last 6 years learning how to fight enemies who think they're invincible. Now we're going to teach the rest of the galaxy how to do the same." Over the next few weeks, the stolen data spread through the galaxy like wildfire. Human operatives used their phase technology to place broadcasting devices on thousands of worlds. Alien allies shared the information through their own networks. Even Council-controlled media couldn't suppress the sheer volume of evidence. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Worlds that had been loyal to the Council for centuries declared independence. Military units defected to join the growing rebellion. Even some of the minor Council species began questioning their allegiance. The 3 ruling species found themselves facing something they had never experienced in 500 years of domination, a galaxy that was no longer afraid. Of them, the Council's first response was predictable. They blamed the humans, calling them terrorists and criminals, who were spreading lies to destabilize galactic civilization. But the evidence was too complete, too detailed, too damning to dismiss. Their second response was more dangerous. Announced that any world harboring human operatives would be subject to immediate military action. Any species found cooperating with the human plague would face the same fate as humanity had been promised 6 years ago. But this time, the galaxy didn't submit. This time they had allies who could teach them how to fight back. Captain Turner, now promoted to Admiral, stood on the bridge of the first human dreadnought to operate openly in Council space. Around him, the bridge crew included beings from 20 different species, all united by their shared hatred of the Council's crimes. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, "we're receiving messages from rebellion groups in 16 sectors. They're ready to begin coordinated operations on your command." Turner smiled grimly. The revelation of the Council's genocide had done more than just turn the galaxy against them. It had given every species a reason to fight that went beyond simple revenge. They were fighting for the memory of all the civilizations that had been murdered. They were fighting for the right to exist without fear. They were fighting for a galaxy where species could grow and develop without being eliminated for the crime of being different. The Council had forced Earth's hand 6 years ago. Now the entire galaxy was about to show them what happened when you push too many species too far. Admiral Kane stood on the bridge of the Earth's flagship Defiance, watching as the largest fleet in human history prepared for the final assault. On Nexus Prime, around him, holographic displays showed the positions of over 3,000 ships, representing 67 different species that had joined the Free Galactic Alliance. It had been 8 years since the Council delivered their Ultimatum to Earth. 8 years since humanity vanished behind Dr. Park's dimensional barrier. Now they were returning not as the desperate refugees the Council expected, but as the leaders of a galactic revolution. All fleet commanders report ready, announced his tactical officer, Velthy named Saren, who had lost her entire family to Council mining operations. Phase drives are charged and synchronized. Kane nodded, looking out at the swirling colors of dimensional space that hid their fleet from Council sensors. In normal space, they would be visible from light years away. But Dr. Park's technology had advanced far beyond simple barriers. Now they could move entire armadas through dimensions, appearing anywhere in the galaxy with no warning. Open a channel to all ships, Kane ordered. The communication grid activated, connecting him to thousands of captains and crew members spread across the vast fleet. Human faces appeared alongside alien features that would have been terrifying 8 years ago, but now looked like old friends. Today we end 500 years of tyranny, Kane began, his voice carrying to every ship in the fleet. Today we make the Council answer for every species they've murdered, every world they've destroyed, every civilization they've erased from history. He paused, thinking of all the intelligence reports that had crossed his desk over the past 2 years. The rebellion had spread to every corner of the galaxy. Entire sectors had declared independence. Council loyalist forces were defecting daily. But the 3 ruling species still controlled the most powerful weapons in the galaxy. They had made it clear they would rather destroy everything than lose their power. The Council thinks they know what humans are capable of, Kane continued. They've studied our history, our wars, our violence, but they've never understood our greatest strength. We don't just fight for ourselves, we fight for everyone who can't fight back. Throughout the fleet, crew members from dozens of different species nodded in agreement. The Council had made a critical error in their understanding of humanity. They saw humans as just another aggressive species to be controlled or eliminated. They never realized that humans were the galaxy's first species to consistently fight for others, rather than just themselves. Fleet commanders, begin the approach. Remember, our target is the Council Command Center, not the civilians. We're here to liberate, not conquer. Kane closed the channel and turned to his science officer. Dr. Park, are you certain the dimensional barriers will hold under this kind of stress? The elderly scientist, now in his 70s but still sharp as ever, nodded confidently. The calculations are solid, Admiral. We can phase the entire fleet directly into the Nexus system. They won't see us coming until we're already there. Kane took a deep breath. The next few hours would determine whether the galaxy would be free, or whether the Council would succeed in destroying everything rather than lose control. Intelligence reports suggested that the ruling species had prepared something called the Final Protocol, a weapon system that could sterilize entire sectors of space if they faced defeat. All ships initiate phase jump in 3.2.1. Reality twisted around the fleet as 3,000 ships slipped through dimensional space and emerged in the heart of the Nexus system, where moments before there had been empty space around the Council's capital world. Suddenly, the largest armada in galactic history materialized like an avenging angel. The Council's response was immediate but useless. Their massive defense stations opened fire with weapons that could crack planets. But the beams passed harmlessly through ships that existed partially in another dimension. The Alliance fleet had learned to fight in ways the Council couldn't counter. Admiral, we're receiving surrender requests from the outer defense platforms, reported his communications officer. Their crews are mostly conscripts from subjugated species. They want to join us. Kane wasn't surprised. The rebellion had been spreading even into the Council's own military. When beings learned that their commanders had been systematically murdering their neighbors for centuries, loyalty became hard to maintain. Accept all surrenders and assign liaison officers to coordinate their integration, Kane ordered. But keep scanning for Council loyalist forces. The ruling species won't give up easily. On the surface of Nexus Prime, the 3 ruling species were indeed preparing for their final gambit. In the deepest levels of their command center, built from the bones of extinct worlds and powered by the death energy of murdered civilizations, they activated weapons that had never been tested. The Ashanti delegate's crystal form pulsed with angry light. The humans think they have one, but they cannot comprehend the forces we control. The Krell mass writhed with agitation. The final protocol will eliminate every ship in this system, including our own. Are we certain this is the correct path? The Etherean's energy form flickered with what might have been doubt. If we cannot rule, then nothing will remain to be ruled. Activate the stellar destabilization device. Above them, Kane watched as energy readings around Nexus Prime's star began to spike. Dr. Park, what are they doing? The scientist's face went pale as he studied the sensor data. They're destabilizing the star itself. If they succeed, the explosion will destroy everything in this system and probably damage ships even in dimensional space. Kane realized with horror that the Council was willing to commit the ultimate act of spite. Rather than face defeat, they would destroy their own capital world and take as many enemies with them as possible. Can we stop it? Park shook his head. Not with conventional weapons. The device is buried too deep in the planet's core. But, he paused, his expression changing. There might be another way. Explain. If we could phase the entire planet into dimensional space, the stellar destabilization would be contained in a separate reality. It would burn itself out without affecting our universe. Kane stared at him. You're talking about moving an entire world between dimensions. Is that even possible? Theoretically, yes. But it would require perfect coordination between every ship in the fleet. Someone would have to stay behind to manually operate the controls. Kane understood immediately. It was a suicide mission. Whoever stayed to operate the dimensional equipment would be trapped when the planet phased out of normal space. I'll do it, Park said quietly. Like hell you will, Kane replied. You're too valuable to lose. Admiral, I'm an old man who's already lived longer than I expected. This technology is my creation. I understand it better than anyone else. And I've been carrying guilt for 8 years about the mountain that disappeared in my early experiments. Before Kane could argue, his tactical officer interrupted. Sir, the stellar destabilization is accelerating. We have maybe 20 minutes. Before the star goes critical, Kane looked around his bridge at the faces of humans and aliens who had become his family over the years of fighting together. The choice was simple. Sacrifice one life to save billions, or watch the Council's final act of evil succeed. Dr. Park, prepare your equipment. All ships, begin positioning for synchronized dimensional manipulation. The next 18 minutes were the most precise military operation in galactic history. Every captain in the fleet had to position their ship at exact coordinates around Nexus Prime. Every science officer had to synchronize their dimensional generators to the same frequency. Every crew member had to trust that humanity's crazy plan would actually work. Dr. Park beamed down to the planet's surface, along with a small team of volunteers who insisted on staying with him. They fought their way through automated defenses and counseled loyalist troops to reach the dimensional control center that had been secretly built into the planet's crust years ago. Fleet positioning complete, Saren reported. All ships report ready for dimensional phase. Kane opened a channel to Dr. Park on the planet's surface. Doctor, we're ready on our end. Understood, Admiral. Beginning dimensional phase in 10 seconds. It's been an honor serving with you all. Kane felt tears in his eyes as he gave the final order. All ships initiate dimensional phase now. 3,000 ships acting as one generated a dimensional field more powerful than anything ever attempted. The planet Nexus Prime, along with Dr. Park and his volunteers, flickered and faded from normal space, just as the star behind it exploded. The stellar explosion that should have destroyed half the system instead burned itself out in dimensional space, contained in a reality where it could hurt no one. The Council's final weapon had been turned into nothing more than a spectacular light show. In the silence that followed, Kane's fleet found itself alone in the Nexus system. The 3 ruling species were gone, trapped in dimensional space with their dying star. The Council's military forces throughout the galaxy, learning that their commanders had tried to commit galactic genocide rather than face defeat, surrendered en masse or defected to the Alliance. 6 months later, President Torres stood before the first galactic assembly held on a free world in over 500 years. Representatives from hundreds of species filled the great hall that had been built on the ruins of the old council headquarters. Today we establish not a new council, but a new way of governing ourselves, Torres announced. No species will rule over others. No civilization will be eliminated for being different. No world will be forced to submit to authority they did not choose. The response was not the polite applause of diplomatic protocol, but the cheering of beings who had lived their entire lives in fear and were finally free. In the months that followed, the galaxy began to change in ways that would have been impossible under Council rule. Species that had been separated for centuries re-established contact. Technologies that had been suppressed were finally developed. Art and music and literature flourished as civilizations no longer had to fear being eliminated for expressing dangerous ideas. Earth emerged from behind its dimensional barrier to find itself not conquered or forgotten, but hailed as the liberators of the galaxy. Humanity had done something that no other species had ever managed. They had united the galaxy not through conquest, but through the simple, radical idea that everyone deserved to be free. Admiral Kane, now elderly and retired, often stood on the observation deck of the memorial station that had been built where Nexus Prime used to orbit. The station honored all the species that had been eliminated by the Council, including Dr. Nemo, Park and his volunteers who had saved the galaxy at the cost of their own lives. Sometimes other species asked him how humanity had managed to defeat the most powerful civilization in galactic history. His answer was always the same: we didn't defeat them by being stronger or smarter, he would say. We defeated them by remembering something they had forgotten. Every sentient being has the right to exist, to grow, and to choose their own path. When you fight for that principle, you're not just fighting for yourself, you're fighting for everyone who came before and everyone who will come after. The galaxy had forced Earth's hand 8 years ago. Now it bled with the birth of true freedom, and that blood would nourish civilizations yet to be born. Humanity had kept their promise, had made sure that no species would ever again face the choice between submission and extinction. The galaxy was free, and it would remain free as long as there were beings willing to fight for the simple, radical idea that everyone deserved to live without fear. The Council was dead. Long live the free galaxy.